Let us look at proposition number 13 of book 8 of Euclid's Elements. The proposition says, if there are as many numbers as we please in continued proportion, and each multiplied by itself makes some numbers, then the products are proportional. And if the original numbers multiplied by the products makes certain numbers, then the latter are also proportional. So let's see how we can prove this. Given A, B, C, such that A is to B equal to B is to C. They are in continued proportion. E is A times A multiplied by itself. E is B times B. F is C times C. Then their products. So G is A times D. And as we know, this is D is A times A. So G will be A times A times A. So AQ. H is B times E. K is C times F. Now we are going to look at terms in between D and E and E and F. Let L be A times B and O is B times C. Let's take numbers in between G and H. How? By taking the product of A and L to get M. Similarly, N will be B times L. P is going to be B times O and Q will be C times O. So we have these numbers. A is to B is equal to D is to L. Yes, because D is measured by A and L is measured by B. Same number of times, that is A number of times. A is to B is equal to L is to E. A is to B is equal to L is to E. Why? Because again, L is measured by A B number of times and E is measured by B number of times. So both of them are measured by B number of times. So A is to B is equal to L is to E. Like that, we can arrive at all these proportions. So now here, what do we see? We see that DLE are in continued proportion. Is to L is equal to L is to. Now, similarly, we can look at GHK and the numbers in between them. So here we are basically focusing on DLE first and then GM and H. So A is to B is equal to G is to M. Figure out this. G is measured by A the same number of times that M is measured by B. Similarly, A is to B is equal to M is to A. Again, you can look at this. A will measure M the same number of times that B will measure N. A is to B is equal to N is to H. Again, A measures N the same number of times that B measures H. So that means G is to M is equal to M is to N is equal to N is to H. That means G, M, and H are in continued proportion. So we have DLE and GM and H in continued proportion. Similarly, we can look at B is to C equal to E is to O. B is to C is equal to O is to F. E is to O is equal to O is to F. You can look at the number of times that E and O measure O and F, or we can just look at these two. So B is to C equal to E is to O, B is to C equal to E, O is to F, which means E is to O is equal to O is to F. So that means E, O, F are in continued proportion. Similarly, B is to C is equal to H is to P. B is to C is equal to H is to P. B is to C is equal to P is to Q. And B is to C is equal to Q is to K. So H is to P is equal to P is to K. Q is equal to Q is to K. So that means H, P, Q, K are in continued proportion. Now here if you notice D, L, E are in continued proportion. In what ratio? In the ratio of A is to B. E, O, F are in continued proportion. In what ratio? B is to C. But A is to B is equal to B is to C. We are given that. So that means DLE is equal to EOF. The number of those numbers are also equal. There are three numbers here, three numbers here. So which means we can say X equally B is to E is equal to E is to F. So that means we have proved one part of the proposition, which said that if A, B, C are multiplied by themselves, then their products with themselves are in proportion. And their products are nothing but D, E, and F. Okay. Now let's look at the second part. The products of A and D, B and E, and C and F, they will also be in proportion. So G, M, and H are in continued proportion. In what ratio? In the ratio of A is to B. H, P, Q, K are in continued proportion in what ratio? B is to C. So which means, and the number of numbers are also same. 4 numbers, 4 numbers. So we can say G, M, and H equal to H, P, Q, K, and multitudes are same, and A is to B equal to B is to C. So which means X equally we can say G is to H is equal to H is to K. So the product of A and D is G, B and E is H, C and F is K, and these three numbers are also in proportion. That is proposition number 13 of book 8 of Euclid's Elements. Again, let me remind you, there is a link to a PDF book which describes all these propositions in detail. Please feel free to download it, refer to it. And if you think somebody else can also benefit from it, please do share. That's it for now.